catch up as I make some quick edits. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. Let's kill that. Alright, so hopefully video is up and things are working. It's been a long time. It's been 2 weeks. So I feel a little rusty, a little out of the game. Like, where did I leave off? What were we even doing? Let's go ahead and open up MudZ, the game we were working on. I see Smudge says yo in chat. Yo Smudge, long time no see. Gotta warm up my vocal cords. I gotta get used to the space. Man, 2 weeks will make you feel old. Synapses gotta start firing again. Alright, hopefully this will all come back. So, gave a lot of thought to things over the last 2 weeks, and you know, this whole streaming thing is streaming code anyway. It's for me it's brand new, and I think there's people out there who've been doing it for a long time. But the shape of the movement still feels nebulous, so I'm trying to find my place in it. But so far so good. Alright, so this was the game. Let's just go back through and see what we wanted to do, what we wanted to accomplish, what we've done so far, and really what moving forward looks like. Man, look at all these tabs for days. Okay, get rid of all that. Come over to MudZ. I'm gonna start off on the right foot. I'm gonna give it 2 more minutes before I even look at chat. Right, 5 minutes, and get my chat break. So, first off, this whole README is in disarray. There was an idea here, but proved a bit unwieldy in the end. Like getting all the links set up right and the videos. There's a lot of work to be done here. But going back to the very beginning, factory pattern, strategy pattern, bridge pattern, command pattern, state pattern, flyweight pattern, adapter pattern, interpreter pattern, singleton, chain responsibility, interpreter revisited, adapter revisited, template pattern, right? So we've actually covered a lot in this series over the last 2 semesters. And at the end of last semester, I kind of made the promise to everyone that we start focusing on a lot of these things. Code quality and best practice, code craftsmanship. Smudge was kind enough to put out a style guide, which is out there. And then also in this interim, Visual Studio 2015 came out and really started pushing analyzers, static code analyzers, ways to improve code quality. There's a lot of things to do in 2015 involving metrics. It may not be easier, but it's definitely, as far as availability, there hasn't been this easy. It's never been this easy to write good code if you're really dedicated to it. So, what I propose is kicking off, letting MudZ continue to evolve and mature and kind of incorporate a lot of these style guidelines as we learn them. But let me kick off a new project. I'll give you my ideas for that. That's why the title of this was Factory Pattern, because we're going right back to the beginning. So if I start up MudZ, I got my login. I type in Gary. It says, welcome back, Gary. I can fight Carl. Right, I can heal Carl. I can get test hammer. I can do inventory, so I can see these things. I can look around. I can fight Carl again. I can equip the test hammer that's down in my inventory. Oops, a little debug point. I'll continue. Okay, a little issue with the actual text displaying, but if I fight Carl again, yeah, so things in the game are working. But it's also gotten to a point of complexity to where I think it's letting the complexity of the game and really the fun of the game. This is fun to get this far. You don't want to let it go. It's a bit of sunk cost theory, right? So a lot of that, the fancy dancy and all the colors and stuff, are obscuring the idea of learning design patterns. So I thought a great new project in the same vein of text-based stuff was this concept of interactive fiction, right? Harkening way back to the days of Zork, to adventure, getting into all the things you played on your Commodore 64, onto your Amiga, then onto your first PC or your Apple II GS. Am I dating myself? Probably. But there's definitely an opportunity here to write kind of a choose-your-own-adventure engine, right? Or an interactive fiction engine. And I started up a repo just called Storybox, and I haven't added anything to it. So, I'm sorry, Storybox. I got this thing with the box naming convention where I like to name like Sharpbox, Storybox, Tightbox. I don't know what it is. All right, I'm gonna catch them on chat, and we can figure out where to go from here. Stu's saying that analyzers are hard to write, and I haven't even looked at them. You know, all I know is that I'm sorry, I did actually. I downloaded one for 2015, and my biggest complaint was it added so much noise to my code. Right? It was like, you need to do this and this and this, and I was like, I never want to do that. Right? So after working with it for 5 minutes, I immediately wanted to remove it. And I thought to myself, well, if I ever did anything like that, I have to write from scratch. So, but 2015 is out there, and all these things are out there, and they're in your face, right? Like, when you download 2015 and you debug for the first time, by default, it brings up the metrics for how fast your application's running, how long things take. And so if you aren't used to that, it's very crowded compared to even Visual Studio 2013. But it's nice to know that we're in the spirit of the industry, right? That we're talking about code quality and code craftsmanship. Again, Smudge has a style guide out there, which I've been flipping through. And that these things are becoming a necessary part of your personal software process. So it makes sense that if we're sitting here doing design patterns, that we would also incorporate them directly. So, boom, boom, boom. I like the idea of keeping the purity of the stream to being design patterns, but at the same time, really making sure that we're continuously improving by incorporating the things in Smudge's style guide, the best practices, and keeping all of this stuff in mind, right? So, to kick things off, let's go ahead and go to Team Explorer. I got Storybox here. I'll do my little connect button. And then down over here on my local Git repositories, I'm going to clone. I'm just going to paste in my link. And it's going to my repos folder, so that's fine. Okay, so that's cloned. I want to double click on it so that in Team Explorer, I've told Team Explorer this is where I want to be working. Then under Solutions, I just want to go to New Solution, and that's it, right? So anything that I do from this point forward is going to be hooked into that Git repo, and when I commit, it's all going to go back up there for people to look at. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just do a class library, and you're starting off on the right foot. Last time I thought it was going to be really clever and I was going to make mud Z and lowercase. That's not right. It's more wrong than it could be. So I'm just going to do Storybox. Dot. I'm leaving here for a second because Should I capitalize the B in box? That is the question. We can call it CLI. Oops. Let me catch up on chat while we really get into the semantics of whether B should be capitalized. Hang on, as usual, Smudge has a link. All right, I think the consensus from chat is that, whoa, where did my new, that was weird. Okay, I think the consensus from chat is that we're going to call Storybox all one word, and it looks better, aesthetically pleasing. I'm just going to CLI for my first project. Okay. And I don't have chat up on this window, but there's a solution structure. Hang on. Let's see if I can find it. Because I like this. So this is what's recommended. This is good. I like it. Okay. So try to follow this. So the question then becomes, in this GitHub kind of world, do I make things like docs and source solution folders? Or do I make them actual physical folders on like the drive? That's my question. Let's go and start this, and if we're wrong, we'll fix it. Oops. I want my solution names to be Storybox. Okay. Okay, so I will be following this. It's kind of new at me right now, so I might be doing it offline, and then we'll kind of reinforce next time. But I like it. Okay, so what else am I doing? Trilio. Okay, so the namesake of this cast, we're going to try to get through all this new project stuff, but at the same time, kind of look at the factory pattern and kickstart this project. So for the factory pattern kata, I had create a Git repo or burn the old one. That is done. Create a simple UI. And again, we're coming at this fresh. So let's do this. Make sure it's a console application. Hit that. Add a new item. Call that program.cs. Oops. Alright. Hang on real quick. I'm going to smudge this Trilio nice. Yeah, this is kind of where it all started. Getting back to the roots. My setup's kind of new too, so I'm standing, but I moved my desk around. I got my laptop way over here now, so It really feels like starting over because I'm doing all this stuff differently from before. Okay, so with my new laptop, things aren't what they should be. Okay, anywho. Alright, so I got my little program here, which is great. Is it object args? Or is it string args? I think it's string. And so if you didn't catch that, I started off CLI as a class library, and then I switched it to a console app. And so normally you'd be given this file to write it from scratch, which makes that second part of our kata, which is create a simple UI, even more important, because you want to make sure that you're in a known good state, right? So that with a very, very simple piece of code, everything's as you expected. It seems trivial, but I am always surprised by how far I'll get in a tutorial or how far I'll get into a project without just testing to make sure that my system's is in the desired state, right? I've definitely made this mistake with like Node.js projects where I'll get way into it and then I go to run and I've written so much code that I don't know what's causing the problem, only to realize later that it was something like in my pathing and my npm installs and like where they were going and nothing to do with the code I wrote. So if you're out there and you're downloading 2015 for the first time, you're updating from 2013 to 2015, I think it's always a great idea to make sure that things are going to be working the way you expect with as little on the plate as possible. All right, so there we go. Hello world. Awesome. Okay. And we're going to do a select a suitable domain aggregate. So, let's pull up a notepad. So, Storybox. What is it? A little brainstorming here. So what I want to be able to do is I want to be able to, step 1, present a bit of prose, right? So I want to be able to say, when the user first comes in, they'll just be printed in with like a scenario. Like they find themselves in a room, and that room's going to have descriptions, and then various items they can interact with, and then a command prompt, right? And the goal of interactive fiction, now, there can be puzzles and such, but we're going to do a very, very simple engine. And the whole point of Storybox is going to be to give you an engine to write very simple interactive fiction. I like this, right? So, to give you an example of Planetfall, just to give you like what it looks like, right? Ooh, none of this. So I don't know how well it's coming through. Not very well, unfortunately. But there's this definite feeling of conformity, right? Whenever you see a lot of these, you're going to say, man, I can recognize an interactive fiction game more or less by this layout. There's the name, there's the copyright, there's the trademark stuff, there's the releases, and then you're immediately dropped into the story, and then you have a command line. So I'm not going to get into the history of it, but it's definitely a throwback. It's definitely something that has a really rich community out there right now. But you just don't hear about it as much as I think you should. So, present a bit of prose. And then give the user a command prompt. Right? And then have items in the prose which, when interacted with, allow the user to advance. Okay, so that's it. That's really it. So all we want to be able to do is to say, from whatever data source we decide, whether it's an Excel document or a database or whatever have you, to load up this, I don't even know what to call it, really. We'll just call it a game, right? And then the Storybox framework will take it from there. So, again, just to be able to present a bit of the story, give the user a command prompt, and then have in the items in the prose let them, when they interact with them, like open door, or turn on computer, or do whatever have you, right? There's going to be some red herrings in there, so things you can interact with, but don't allow you to advance. And then get to step 2. And then, so within this, there could be some puzzle logic, but the real idea here is to be able to give you a platform just to write stories. Not terribly exciting, but what it does allow you to play around with is the command pattern, right? Just for one, right? And as we get into it, you'll start to see, wow, I can construct this game using just a few patterns. It's actually going to be easier than the mud game we wrote, but hopefully just as rewarding. So let's go back over to Trilio. All right, so select a suitable domain aggregate. So what I want to do, first off, is I've got my CLL project, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. Which will be my class library, which I'm going to call storybox.core. I use core to signify where all my business logic is living. So in the case of interior architecture, I usually go presentation, business, data, right? And then when you move into in-tier, just means it can be a arbitrary number of tiers, whether it's service tier, utilities tier, whatever have you. My presentation tier could be web, console, graphics, who knows. So I'll delete this guy. And create a new folder. And I haven't made many changes to the way that I do this. I usually just make a domain folder, and then inside of that, I decide that this is my first domain aggregate is going to, so all the business logic for this aggregate is going to fall into this folder, right? So it's domain, then aggregate, and then all the things inside of there. So I want to do the factory pattern. So the first thing that I want to be able to do is let the user pick a game, right? So let's call this the loader. Domain, create a new item. I'm going to have a class that represents the game. Right, thinking. We'll just call this game. Is that going to hurt anybody's feelings? I'll say game. There's a good point, because I think this sometimes gets confusing, and I've definitely heard some strong opinions about having folder model be named the same thing. So I'll check in chat in a few minutes to see if there's any strong feelings about it, and we'll change as needed. Okay, so there's my domain aggregate. We don't even care what a game consists of yet, but we just know that there's going to be a game. Okay, and then we need to create an enum for the types. In this case, our types are going to be the different games we have access to. Oops. So I'm going to call this game name. Sounds funny. I read someplace recently that some of the greatest challenges in computer science are just naming things. And I completely believe that. So I'm going to call this game library. Make that an enum. And for right now, I'm just going to do some arbitrary names. So I was writing an interactive fiction called Sin, S-Y-N. I don't really care what it's called or why that is, but it's definitely going to be one that I'm going to use to help push the game forward. And then I'm going to say maybe another one just is called Bubble Commander, right? Yeah, it's funny because it's hard to think up good names, because as soon as you think up like a good name, you want to use it for something, right? So if it's like a really clever name, you're like, oh my goodness, that's too clever to not use. So I'm intentionally going to try to use some silly names. Yeah, so Smudge says woot for the singular enum instead of the plural, like in MudZ. See, we're learning. We're trying to correct these things as we go, so we're taking it real slow to make sure that we can really keep a handle on these things and fix them as we go. And then Micklax. Hello, Micklax. Oh, and also, hello, Smudge. Hey, Rob. Hey, Stu. Hello to everybody out there who's lurking, who is joining us again after so many weeks of design patterns and bearing with the kind of feeling out where these things are going. We're definitely at the first week of this new project, so it's gonna be slow. But if it's anything like MudZ, by the time we get to like week 7, 8, or 9, we're gonna be like, wow, I wish we could go back to the slow days because we're covering so much. But Micklax says, hello, could you tell me why you decide to use a standing desk? Sure. So I program for my living, and I spend 8 hours a day in an office. And then I come home, and I'm a geek, so I'm whether I'm geeking out on the couch with my wife or in my office like I am now, there's a good chance I'm sitting for just a very, very long time. And also, because I'm such a really just in my head introvert sometimes, once I'm in my office, I can be in here and lose all track of time. So the standing desk offers me a few things. Firstly, it's great for me just to be able to get a few extra steps in my day. Just the idea of moving around, keeping the blood flowing, it's very nice. And secondly, after about 30 minutes, I want to go do something else. I naturally hit a point where I want to move on to another task. And so it's great for being more efficient with the things I need to do. So I hope that answers the question. So, and Smudge pointed to a CA about the naming convention. So This will probably change, right? Because it definitely, it feels like a code smell just looking at it, right? Game in game. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and change it now. It won't be the final naming, but at least it'll be different, right? So I'll go ahead and say, I'll put it back over to the loader. So now I've got a game, I've got a game library. So I've got my domain aggregate, and I also have my types. So coming over here to the enum types, I can select over here. Alright, so create some POCOs to feed the factory. Again, this is all part of the kata that we really went in depth with last time, but it's going to be any factory pattern description you can find out there. And we just kind of wrote a kata around it. So, oops. Yes. So then for loader, I just need to pick a place. Add a new project. So we're doing some things that we didn't do until later inside of MudZ, but to avoid some of the really heavy refactoring that we had to do last time, I'm going to go ahead and kind of piece these things out now. I'm going to delete that. Okay, and add a new item. Called Game Repository. You know what? I wrote that out and I immediately decided that it's probably way too early to even talk about what a repository is. So I'll just go ahead and add our POCOs. Let's just stick to the factory pattern. So there you go. Here's Sin. That was our one game. Add new item. Call this Bubble Commander. What was our other one? Just the 2. Alright, I think 2 is fine. Oh my goodness. Smudge gave me a hard time for me having this domain folder, since my domain is Storybox. I completely agree. I really do. I'm going to make it a point for myself to change this inside of my personal software process into something else that I like. So I'm being kind of selfish right now, but I'm also giving myself a bit of homework. As we're looking at starting up this new semester and these new projects and doing things the right way, in addition to kind of going through these katas, like what is a factory, what does it do, what does it add to the cleanliness of our code, we're really going to start to really analyze why I'm doing some of the things that I'm doing. So next time we meet, I should have a really good answer for this, and then also justification. Right now I don't. And so it's hard for me in this kind of egocentric world that I'm in to change it without a good grasp on it. But I recognize that. I do recognize that's the idea, right? It's that more of these things become kind of like code smells. Like when you look at it, you're like, ooh, it's an anti-pattern. I see why you did it, but it's a little wrong. Okay. So I did create some POCOs. And the only thing that I want to add to this data project is some form of abstraction. So when we're talking about design patterns, some of the common themes you'll find in all design patterns is you're taking a problem and you're abstracting it into a pattern, right? So you're always going to have this abstraction, something that exists independent of the problem, right? So I guess the best way I've always been able to think about it is that the pattern's a tool. So you can think about it that way. Like a pattern's a tool and the nail's the problem, right? They would never be connected, right? So view them as two separate things. Don't bake your tool into your problem, right? You need to abstract it out or it's not going to work properly. Hope that makes sense. Okay. So I decided on a domain aggregate, which is game, and I created an enum for the types of games I want to be loading, and then I created some POCOs that can be loaded up through this game. So I come back over here and I add a reference to my data project. And then inside of CLI, I add references to both my core and my data. So now all these projects know what everything else is. So I came in here and I said that I want to give the user the ability to play the game sin. I would say var sin is equal to new data.domain.loader.sin. Right? Well, and then if I wanted to give the player the ability to play Bubble Commander, I would say var Bubble Commander equals new data.domain.loader.bubble commander. So this is the way that I without the use of a factory, this is how I'd be forced to new up games. So if we can imagine that I say console.writeLine, please type the game you want to play, and then I say var game name is equal to console dot, let's say readline, and then I've got the game name. So this is going to present a line to the user. They're going to then type in their response. I'm going to go ahead and give them a console. And they're going to type in the response, and then I'm going to have the variable game name. And then I have to find a way to load up the proper game name. And so typically, that would be something like, okay, if game name is equal to sin, then I could load in some fashion Bubble Commander. So this is the problem we're trying to solve. We're trying to get rid of if statements. We're trying to encapsulate this so that what I really want to do is just say var game is equal to game factory and pass in the game name. And then I can abstract away this problem. That's all I'm doing. I got a factory pattern, and it promises to solve this problem of creating new objects. It's a creational pattern, and it says, don't worry about ugly if statements. Don't worry about anything like that. If you can abstract this away into a common contract that we can follow and guarantee, then that'll be the way to solve this problem. Oops. Oh yeah, so someone just saying CLI should depend on core service layer, which in turn can rely on data dependencies, should avoid dependency creep. I completely agree. And we're going to get there once we get to the common layer. Am I throwing too much? This is like the new improved factory pattern. It's really kind of hitting the ground with some gusto, right? Let's go ahead and do that. So, add new project. Storybox.common. Okay. Delete this guy. Just the basic class that comes with it. So, to Smudge's point, we found this in MudZ, where after we've written so much code, we eventually got to this need to have a common library. And this way, the common library can be shared amongst all these projects, and it'll keep track of all the abstractions. So, and you'll see that I'm following this personal software process of domain. I've already decided to probably use some help, but I don't know how to solve it yet. So I'm just going to follow it so that I can refactor everything at once. So instead of comma or instead of loader, I'm going to say my abstraction for this is going to be a new item. It's going to be an interface. iGame. So this is going to be the thing that when any project talks about game, it's going to be using the contract iGame, right? So we're abstracting out to this guy. So then right in here, I'm going to say, give me a new item. I'm going to call it game factory. Okay, so inside of my game factory, public class game factory, I'm going to say public iGame, and then create game library. Getting there, right? So I need to add a reference to my common library here inside of core. And so I'm using the common contract iGame. And then, like Smudge was saying, I don't actually need to know about data here anymore. But I need to know about common. So everything knows about common. And then my game inherits from iGame. Or obeys the interface. Hang on, wait, Smudge just hit me on the head. Well, now I don't feel so bad. So there's a semantic issue with my use of abstraction, but Smudge hasn't finished the article. So I'm in the clear. I'm in the clear until Smudge finishes the article. Smudge, don't finish the article. Let me have this. But no, this is great stuff. Okay, so I don't even need anything inside of game right now. But you see that I'm no longer looking at the data project anymore, so those things broke. As well they should. So inside my data, I'm going to go ahead and add the reference to common. And then I'm going to say, well, I want Bubble Commander to inherit from iGame as well. And then sin is going to be the same way. These little things. Okay, so what have we got? Let's go ahead and write some code inside the factory that says, I'm going to use a switch statement, and then next time we have this little session, we're going to go through all the things with this very basic example that are going to help us to refactor it into the right way of doing these things. We're like, so how to avoid switch statements comes up immediately. It's great. So when we come back to this again, we're going to go through all of these code quality things, the naming conventions, the use of our vernacular, as well as how to avoid some of the dirtier code stuff. So, like, already just talking through it, I feel really good about this round, about how we're going to be able to really communicate some of these principles. So I'm going to do a switch. I'm going to switch on the game name. And then I'm going to do a case. And the case, if it is sin, I'm going to return a new sin. And you can see that resharper is really kind of guessing ahead here, right? So it added a using statement to data domain loader. And then so sin comes from my data project. And then I can do a case bubble commander, return new bubble commander. And then for my default condition, I'm going to throw a new not supported. Maybe an invalid argument. Argument exception. Sorry, that game is not in the library. Okay, whoa, I really stepped away from our kata. Create a factory wrapper. Okay, I did that. But you know what should actually be in here? Create simple EI, create an aggregate, create union types, create an abstraction for the POCOs. Oops. Cool. And that really should have gone right there. Okay. So, we're already starting off with a little heavier than we did so many weeks ago. We learned the lesson that we want to go ahead and break up our projects into this kind of in-tier architecture, right? This multi-tiered architecture, which is my presentation, my common abstractions, my core, and my data. And we're still learning, but I got some refactoring to do. But now inside of my game, instead of doing all of this, and hang on, I'll make this static. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and import the using statement for game factory. And then, so what I'm getting in from the user is a string. Let me go ahead and remove this. So I'm getting a string in from the user. And I told my factory to expect the type. So, the easy way around this would be to go into my game factory, change this to a string, and then cast it to a type, right? And put the onus on my factory. But that is incorrect. And we know that from our last game. We know that this is going to be a great opportunity to throw an interpreter here. So our very next pattern, after we get through all the refactoring, is going to say, man, I need to be able to interpret what comes in from the console and turn it into something that the core can understand, right? Because I don't want to pass this unvalidated, untested, unsafe user input directly to my business logic. I want to be able to filter it in some way. That's what the interpreter pattern is going to allow us to do. So by just doing the proper hierarchy of the code and saying that we've got a core tier, a common tier, and a data tier, we can immediately say what we do and do not want to go into the core. And information unchecked from the user going right into our business logic is not what we want to do. So, just to make this happy, we're going to say var game library name type, no idea really, we'll get to that. Game library, we'll just cast the game name from the user in line real fast. Oops. Man, we're going to end up double casting this guy. So we run into the issue that when it comes from the user as a string, game library is a primitive type and supposed to be of type int. Woo! Man. So this is going to be so dirty right now, but we got to do it. So, I'm going to do this here because just to show that every bit of code that you write the statement has weight, right? It's wrong. It is bloody wrong. But this is a very, 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 very simple interpreter. It's a very, very simple algorithm. So when we get to our interpreter pattern, we're going to say, what are we actually trying to do? We're trying to impose some intelligence on the code coming in so that we can safely turn it into something the system can understand. This is not very smart. It is an algorithm. It is interpreting what's coming in, but it's making a whole bunch of assumptions and a whole bunch of blind casts, right? So I wish I could say this is something you would never see in the wild, but this is probably the least of the bad that you'll see in the wild. But right now we don't quite have a way to fix this. But I love that it shows an example of what to fix. So we are interpreting poorly, and then once we've interpreted, we're passing that interpretation onto our factory. And our factory is what's creating the game. So we got our factory pattern in place, and we also have a road forward to our next pattern, which is going to be the interpreter pattern. Okay. So, we do want to test this. And how do we test it? Well, right now, the game, iGame, that contract doesn't have anything. So let's go ahead and give it a string name. That's all I want. And so because we're using an interface is a contract, anything that inherits from iGame now needs to have a name. And that's going to be our two POCOs. So we're going to do public string name, get and set, copy this guy, go into syn, and do that. So let's go ahead and use our factory because it's going to come in handy immediately. So go back into our factory, and I create a new game of syn. Now, the name will probably come from the data tier eventually, but we can also use an object initializer to say syn the sci-fi adventure. And then once I use object initializer, C# is smart enough to let me know that I no longer need the parentheses. I'll do the same thing here. Name is equal to bubble commander. Last bubble. Who knows? Okay. So. Now, if I was to do something like, okay, I have my game, and I can do console.writeLine dot you chose, and then I'll do game.name. So the reason why this works, because my CLI project, my presentation project, has no reference to data. It only has reference to common. So when my presentation project talks to my core, to my factory, it doesn't say give me back an object of type Storybox dot loader dot sin. It doesn't say give me core dot game. It says give me an object of type common.igame. And that little bit of polymorphic OOP magic is what really allows all of this stuff to glue itself together. So I'm going to seed this. Because I know this is not going to work. Oh, it could. Hang on. It could, but we're just going to do it. I'm going to see what happens. Oops. All right, so I wired it all up in my kata. Let's go ahead and run the application and see what happens. Hit start. Build errors. Hold on. Oh, look at that. My class game is not an iGame. Oh. Well, technically, this doesn't even need to be here. Let's go ahead and just delete that guy. Okay, so I'm going to read line. So I outputted my line in my prompt. So I've hit F10. It's going to wait for an input. I'm just going to type in 0. And then it's going to try to cast my parsed string of 0 into a game library type. And so now the game library type is sin. So real quick, I told you it was bad code, I told you it was horrible code, but it just worked. So we need to just take 2 seconds for the last bit of class and say why it worked. So this enum, its backing type is an integer. Now C# does some wonky stuff. But needless to say, when I say 0, if I cast 0 to game library, it's going to turn it into sin. That's as much as I'll say about that. But that's why it works. This is still horrid. It's a horrid algorithm, but it can work. And I think this goes a little ways to show how bad code gets out there. Because bad code can work. And it can work well. All right? That's the most infuriating part about it. Let me catch you on chat. Oh, Smudge is coming at me again. Man, I love you and I hate you, Smudge. Yes. So this is definitely wrong. But I'm very curious to see what you're referring to. So I'm sorry. If you're watching the video, our local Smudge. I'm gonna say local Smudge. because in my mind, it's fun to think of smudge as being like a type, right? Like, so there could be various smudges. Like, I think smudge is in the UK, so there could be like an America smudge and like an Australian smudge, right? Like G.I. Joe action figures, does that translate? Like, they're just different types of smudges. So our resident smudge has a complaint, and this usually results in some great feedback, so I'm actually really curious to see where this goes. But anyway, so here we are, looking at the factory pattern for right now. And so now I've got a game. Let's go ahead and come right back up. Let's go into our factory. I've got my game name, Sin, which is of type game library. I'm going to switch on that, and I'm going to return a new Sin with this name populated. And then when I come down the right line, I say you chose, and then game name. So I'm going to come right back over here. Say you chose Sin, the sci-fi adventure. So that's it, really. That's the factory pattern. We're able to kickstart this whole Storybox framework game idea and go through our factory kata, which is here, run the application, profit. All right, and then I had kind of like a bonus one in the kata, create a second level to the domain, extend one of the root types into its own factory. Don't need to get into that now, because what we really want to do the next time is go through and do all of the refactorings, figure out what our complaints are, what our naming convention should be, if we've done everything properly. And we want to be able to do that when we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 files. We also want to come back over here and really figure out and take advantage of this solution layout, right? So we got this now as well. So let's I'm just going to say source code organization. Grab this guy. Smudge says there's only one smudge in the whole world. He's everywhere and anywhere all at once. That might be true. That might actually be true. So I also want to prune chat for some of the... I have to do it on that computer, but I also want to prune chat for some of Smudge recommendations, for readings, for examples, for all of that. Because anything that Smudge or Rob or anybody, or Stu, or anybody said in chat is going to confer to what we did today. I think that's really valuable. And so I want to make sure we don't miss anything. I know for the last few semesters we've got some great recommendations from chat, and they've been lost, right? So I want to make sure to grab all those now, and before we move forward, make sure that we're really analyzing how to do these things properly, so that when we get to the same place in our game as we are right now in MudZ, it can be a real good shining example of what to do. All right, let me Smudge asks if he wants me. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, do I want Smudge to PR the solution layout? That'd be great if you got the time. I'll be checking in another day or two. So, I guess the other small change is last semester I was doing 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm going to try out, and bear with me, I'm going to try out doing 1 day at a time, and see, or I'm sorry, 1 day a week, and see if that gives me enough time to really stay on top of a lot of these goals that we have. And so I'm hoping what we lose in stream time, we make up for in the quality of the project, the consistency of the documentation, all those good things. So we'll see. We'll see. If it doesn't work out, we'll go back to 2 days a week. But I really think that we can offer a density this time around with 1 day a week, and then a whole lot of production value as far as the GitHub repo and all that good stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and commit this. It does work. We've got everything that we want so far. So we can call it day 1, because I think when we come back next week, we'll say day 2 will be all refactoring. And I just saw in chat that Rob has been up for quite some time, and it is 1 a.m. where he is. So for his benefit and the fact that we're just over an hour, I'm going to go ahead and close down now, catch up on chat. The commit is up there if anybody wants to take a look at it. Some of you lurkers. We'll just make sure that came through. Boom, there it is. So feel free to download, check out Git if Smudge gets around to doing that PR and changing out the solution. Should be some good things coming as I add data here or information here as well. So I feel really optimistic about this time around, and I will see you guys next week. Ooh, I'll check chat and then I'll do my typical wave and shutdown. Oh, well. Sky in chat says it's 3 a.m. where they are. I'm sorry, Rob. Kind of takes the cookie out of your mouth a little bit. I was giving you all that credit for staying up so late when this character is up at 3 a.m. Good gracious. All right. Get some rest. Alright guys, again, thanks again. I'm going to go and shut down. I'm going to linger in chat for a few more minutes, but no reason to have people on YouTube suffer through that. But I'll see you again next week, and we'll do the refactoring of the project, go through the solution layout changes, and really button down our understanding of the factory pattern and also how to kickstart a project. All right, thanks again.